appreciate the opportunity to present Bear Creek to you today. And I thank you for your attendance here as well. Sorry, let me just sort this out. I want you to all take a careful read of this slide. Probably take up more than our allotted 10 minutes. So let me just suffice it to say I'm going to be making some forward-looking statements and also referring to technical information that's covered under 43-101. So I do encourage you to take a look at our website and our CEDAR disclosure and read the information on there pertaining to those items. Bear Creek Mining is a leading silver exploration and development company with a number of assets in Peru. Our flagship project is the Corani property, and Corani is one of the largest undeveloped silver deposits anywhere in the world, and the largest silver deposit in a mining-friendly jurisdiction. It contains about 230 million ounces of silver and 4.5 billion pounds combined lead and zinc. It's also, as Eric mentioned, very highly leveraged to metal prices with an increase in NPV of about $120 million for every $1 increase in silver price with proportional increases in lead and zinc. So that equates to about 5% rate of change. We've worked very hard to secure good and what I would frankly describe as exceptional community relationships. And we have life of mine agreements in place with the communities that surround the Corani project already. We've also secured a number of the key permits and are in the process of applying for the other key permits. So over the course of the coming months, we hope to de-risk the project further on that front. By virtue of a financing that we did last July at about $3 and oversubscribed bought deal financing, we put approximately $30 million in the bank and currently have cash balances of $35 million US. No debt, and that is sufficient to fund Corani through to a production decision. It will not speak to project financing, but we certainly have the wherewithal to get there. Bear Creek has a very compact share structure. We've only ever issued 103 million shares, about 110 million fully diluted. We trade on the venture exchange, approximately 150,000 shares per day. And our market cap is currently just under $300 million. We also have a very robust institutional ownership at about 65%. Our largest single shareholder is Silver Wheaton. They're obviously a corporate shareholder, do not have any kind of royalty streaming deal, any kind of derivative. They're purely just a shareholder and have been a long-term shareholder, bought their shares on the open market. We have, after them, a handful of funds, mostly out of the US. Again, very supportive long-term shareholders that own in the sort of 10 to 12% range. I'm just going to quickly take a look at our stock chart for the last year. And the only thing I particularly want to point out to this is the comparison with the silver price chart underneath, and you can see we do trade pretty much entirely hand in hand with silver. So I'll speak to our Corani project now. As Eric mentioned, it's a silver lead zinc polymetallic deposit located in southern Peru, about midway between the towns of Cusco to the north and Juliaca to the south. It is in a high Andean environment, very arid location, and very sparsely populated. It's also on the eastern slope of the Andes, of the Continental Divide, which is, I guess, an advantage in terms of when we go to secure the water permit, because their prevailing weather is from the east in Peru. And so there are no downstream agricultural concerns with respect to the water usage. This is a view of the Corani property with an outline of where the pit, it's going to be an open pit environment, of where the pit will occur. The photographer in this that took this shot was standing on the hill, you can see in the foreground, is at about 5,100 meters above sea level. So just to reiterate, it's a very sizable deposit. The reserves I quoted you earlier, about 230 million ounces of silver, 1.8 billion pounds of zinc, and 2.8 billion pounds of lead, are in the P&P reserve category. We have an additional resource, measured and indicated resource, that adds about 30% to that. And it occurs basically on the flank of the deposit. We filed actually a number of feasibility studies on the Corani property, the most recent of which was in July 2015, and that was a final and optimized feasibility study that built on a mine plan envisioned in a 2011 feasibility study. And the main modification from 2011 to 2015 was the elimination of a tailings impoundment area and in favor of going with dry stack tailings. After about year 5, those tailings will actually start to backfill the pits that we're excavating. As I mentioned, we have life of mine agreements in place, very, very supportive local communities, although it's a very sparsely populated area. There's nobody living or working anywhere near the site. We have put a lot of effort into maintaining those relationships. We've also purchased all the surface rights necessary to develop this mine and have an environmental permit in hand and other key permits in hand or underway. So this is the results of the feasibility study from 2015. Excuse me, it was done at metal prices at the time of $20 silver, 95-cent lead, and $1 zinc. So obviously things have changed slightly since then, but as Eric mentioned, the net effect on the NPV of Corani has not changed very much. At the base case, it was $643 million. Today's prices, it's just under $600 million. We would envision, as I mentioned, it's an open pit, processing about 22,000 tons per day. It would actually be in 3 different pits that will coalesce together at the end of the day. And the starter pit is particularly high grade. So the life of mine on this operation will be about 18 years. It's a very long life. And will produce about 8.5 million ounces of silver over that 18 years. Because the starter pit is higher grade, it will actually in the first 5 years produce about 13.5 million ounces of silver at a negative all-in sustaining cost. It's a very robust project. I'm going to speak very briefly to the Santa Ana property, which is the second asset we have in Peru. If any of you have followed Bear Creek over the years, as I know Eric has, this is a property that we originally were actually hoping to put into production first and use the cash flow and the proceeds from that mine to help fund the build-out of Corani. In 2010, it got caught in the crosshairs of some political activism in the area, and a key permit that we needed to continue to operate that project was rescinded. So we spent a couple of years trying to negotiate with the government and get the property back, and eventually realized that that really wasn't going to happen. And so we started an international arbitration under the Canada-Peru Free Trade Agreement to recoup our investment in Santa Ana. And I'm happy to say that that process is nearing completion now. These arbitrations can be very long and very costly. I think the market is probably by and large written off Santa Ana, but we argue that there is still pretty significant potential for Santa Ana to contribute to the build-out of Corani in respect of a damages award that we're somewhat confident, I would say fairly confident, that we will be awarded. So after 2 years of back and forth written filings, we had our hearings last September. We're going to be making our last filing on behalf of the tribunal this February, and then we expect they'll close the proceedings and commence their deliberation. So we have our fingers crossed that we'll have an outcome of that before the end of 2017. At Corani, we started what's called Phase 1 detailed engineering, started last November, and we expect that to be wrapped up May or June this year. We believe 2017 is going to be quite a pivotal year for Corani. As we complete the detailed engineering, the results of that will go into the support the documentation needed to apply for our construction permit. So we hope to apply for the construction permit probably late summer, and there's usually a 3 to 4 month turnaround on that. So we hope to have all our permitting risk put to bed by sometime this fall. While we do that, concurrent with that, we'll start to take a pretty hard look at potential project financing scenarios. We've already taken a cursory look at that, and certainly indications are that it's a financeable project. It's not a small project to build, especially as a non-producing company, but it's very robust, and so it seems to have a good level of support behind it. We will obviously have an outcome at some point in time on Santa Ana, and we will continue over the year to continue to meet our obligations under our life of mine agreements. Excuse me. And all of those puzzle pieces, we hope, will all be in line by sometime this fall, and pending market conditions and the securement of financing, we hope to be able to at least consider a production decision before the end of 2017. So that concludes my very superficial review of Bear Creek. If there's any more information you'd like and dive deeper in any aspect of us, I'm more than happy to answer any questions or take you through the presentation and give you a bit more detail at our booth. So thank you very much.